We'll move on from the NFL and go to the college ranks. And like we said, wild week. I mean, just some outlandish fucking games. Game of the week was definitely the Washington-Oregon matchup. It was everything it was cracked up to be and more. Oregon faltered down the stretch. Dan Lanning, and I'll give my take real quick on Oregon. It's like watching the game, to me, the Ducks were the better team for the majority of the game. Washington's offense looked good in the first half. In the second half, I believe the Huskers came out and they scored the first possession of the second half. They then did not score on a single drive until the last possession of the game that they had the ball. And that was to win the game. And they should never have even had that possession. And if Dan Lanning, if Oregon converts that 4th and 3, then we're not even talking about Washington, and we're talking about how their offense stalled down the stretch.
So it was a 4th and 3 to essentially win the game?
So actually it was a 3rd and 1 before that. And this is where I think Dan Lanning cost his team the game. So they went for it 4th and 3 3 times in the game, failed in all 3. So
That's crazy.
It's crazy. All the first 2 were inside the 5-yard line. One was a 4th and goal from the 3, and it was before halftime. It was they could take the points and cut it to a 1-point game. They were down 4, or go for it. They went for it. They threw incomplete, and it was a huge momentum break.
And they got the ball after half.
Oregon got the ball, so they could have cut it to 1.
Yeah,
made it a new game.
You
kick a field goal. It was on the 3, right? Like you just kick a field goal. So they end up not getting it there. Then the second one was the most, I would say, logical. They were down 11. It was inside the 10, and they were down 11, and they were 4th and 3. So I get that one.
Yeah.
But again, if you kick the first one, you're down 8 there. You kick that one, you're down 5 now. So it's a little different. Like
now you're starting to talk like Matt LaFleur. Let's kick a field goal. Let's cut it to 5.
It's a good point.
2 minutes.
But we're talking mid third quarter at this point.
Okay.
So 4th and 3 from the 8 and the third quarter probably do take the points. Anyway. The last one was the most questionable of all of them. It was 4th and 3, like I said, but before it was 3rd and 1. And they had a kid, Bucky Irving, the running back for Oregon, had absolutely run all over Washington in the second half.
It's a great name.
It's a great name, Bucky Irving. What a good name. But they had run all over him. And the dude, he's like super elusive. Like he made a lot of dudes miss. And 3rd and 1, like again, like we talked about earlier with the Giants and Dayball, you put the ball in your best player's hands. And Bo Nix might be their best player, but Bucky Irving was the best player in that game. And they take him out, put their backup running back in because he's more of a big running back. He gets stuffed, loses 2 yards. And now, I believe Washington used their final timeout. There was 150, and Oregon, if they pin them deep, Washington needed a touchdown to win. They were up 4. So it just 4th and 3 there on the. I think they were actually lost to, so they were actually on their own 48-yard line.
It was the 48.
It was the 48, and so they went for it, and it was, again, a roll. All 3 times were rollout passes by Nix, incomplete. And now, here's my thing, and
which is honestly, frankly, if it's 4th and 3, that's what I was about to say, where they're not rolling, because Bo Nix can move, so you figure, especially on that many 4th and 3s, they're going to pick at least 60-70% of them up with him rolling the pocket. But
right, and Washington did a good job on those plays covering, but you tell me what you think. Here's my position. So Washington, obviously they get it and they win and nobody's questioning it, right? But Washington essentially they scored in 2 plays after the turnover, right? So you look at that and you're like, well, had they kicked it, they would have scored, and then Oregon would have had no time to come back and score again because Washington scored so quick that Oregon got the ball back.
Okay.
But my feeling is Washington had gone 3 straight 3-and-outs, had no momentum, and by the momentum of not getting that, and now you giving Washington life there, and all that allowed Washington, plus you're on the 48. It's a perfect shot play, area of the field. So they took a shot on 1st down. Also, and I'm going to go off topic here, and I'll get to this in a second. Michael Penix on the first throw, it should have been intercepted. The safety got lost and was turned around, and he should have picked the ball off, and it should have ended the game on the first throw of the drive. Anyway, they scored twice. They scored in 2 plays. I don't think that their offense, just because they scored in 2 plays from there, means necessarily they would have gone down the field and easily scored anyway. To me, the momentum changed the game.
Yeah.
And if you punt there, you probably win.
Yeah, So my philosophy on it is I I would be interested to see what the analytics say on it. Most of the time, 4th and 3, I think it says go. I don't know.
That's the number. That's the number right? Either way. I don't know.
Like if you're across midfield, and I don't know about the game situation. The one thing I would say, and obviously you know this, but college and NFL is a little different. If it was the NFL, I'd punt it 100 out of 100 times.
Right.
But in college football, when both those teams are just known for their offenses, and I get that Oregon was playing very well, and I'd have to go back and watch it, especially after three straight 3-and-outs. But I probably, if I'm being honest, in his situation, I probably would have just gone and tried to end the game. It's 3 yards. You say, listen, if you get 3 yards, the game's over.
Right.
And if we don't, sure, they have good field position, but if we get a stop, we win the game as well. So it's like if they needed a field goal, actually, it's a weird. It is a weird decision. If it's a field goal, and how much time was left?
There was, I believe, just under 2 minutes.
And so, weirdly enough, and I don't know why, and I would have to check the statistics on this too. But I would actually, if they were down, if it was a field goal game, I would have punted. Because what happens in that situation is
they just try to get a field goal.
They try to get in field goal range. And then, sure, they're kind of trying to score a touchdown. But when it's 4 points, you have all 4 downs to go score a touchdown.
Good point.
And that's all. It's always been a very weird thing with me when I've seen that. But it's like, especially in college and the pros, I mean, in both ways. When you're down 3, it's like, hey, let's just get this ball in field goal range, tie the game. When you're down 4, it's, holy shit, we have to score a touchdown, and we have 4 plays to do it. Let's air this bad boy out and, whatever. I know that's kind of a ludicrous take, but it is true. When you're down 3, people are playing for a tie, not to go win, especially under 2 minutes. I probably would have gone for it, but if you were, I trust you. If you're watching the game and they didn't do anything on offense 3 times in a row, then yeah, you try to pin them deep, I guess. But if it was me in the situation, I think I'd just say, look, I got Bo Nix. He's a pretty good player. My defense is okay. They've been playing well, but I have 3 yards to beat Washington at home. I'm just going to roll the dice and go for it on that.
I will say I am a little bit mistaken. I just looked at the game chart. So they went 3 and out 3 consecutive times. The 4th drive, they went 13 plays, 58 yards, but it took them 7 minutes, and they turned it over on downs. And then at that point, that's where so they hadn't scored on 4 straight possessions. They did move the ball. They just, my feeling to me, just, and I agree with you, like looking at, and when you're saying it, you're convincing me. Like, now that I think about it, if it was Texas, right, and I'm a Texas fan, if it were Texas and Stark punted there and we lose, I'm pissed. Like, I'm like, you could have just ended the game. But it's just the fact that the way the game felt to me was Washington was the nervous side, and they had been leading the entire game. They were up 11 until I think like 7 minutes to go in the game, and somehow Oregon scored like back-to-back times, right? Washington's offense just starts to stall, and now Oregon, all of a sudden, like you blink, and they've got a ball with a chance to run the clock out. So it's just a lot of pressure on Washington, and so the momentum of not getting it like flipped a switch, the whole stadium who had been quiet for the last 7 minutes came to life, and it was like, oh my God, they got the now they look like they're the favorite. Like they're going to score. It's just a matter of how quick.
It's a real interesting debate too, because it's kind of like, okay, as a coach, do I make this decision on what I'm feeling and the momentum in the stadium, or am I just numbers driven and says, hey, the book says go, I'm gonna go.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a very interesting debate. The way I've always looked at it too, and this probably didn't make any sense, is that, okay, I have a 4. Okay, if I get this 4th and 3, which is probably like, I don't know what the numbers, but in college football, I'd say you probably get it like 65% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So I have a 65% chance to win the game now. And if I don't get this and I give them the ball back here, I still have a 40%, another 40% chance. So the way I look at it is you're giving yourself 2 chances. Whereas if you punt it, you have 170% chance to win.
That's a good point.
I don't know what the statistics are in that. If that might be someone from a statistical standpoint may look at that and be like, that's the dumbest thing ever. But it really is. You give yourself 2 chances at a coin flip, and it's not
right.
It might not be. It's skewed a little bit, but I'm saying, why only flip the coin once with a 40% chance to? or whatever. Say it's a 60% chance to hold on. Because I guarantee you, especially in the NFL, it's so different because the secondaries are a little bit more shored up.
Right.
Whatever. College football, man. These guys bring 3 or bring 4 and drop everybody, and someone lets a guy go and they score in one play. In the NFL, it typically does not happen. They keep things in front of them. In college, I just don't trust the secondaries. I go for it. But that's a very interesting debate both ways to see, what people would do.
But moving on, right, we had a absolutely wild week in college football, right? Some just crazy finishes and crazy games.
Yeah, Colorado State was playing Boise State. I know you caught the end of it, the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
But Colorado State I think they had the ball back with just under 5 minutes left, down 20. And went down the field, scored. I think there was a help with some PI, whatever, scored. Got it to 13 with 3:50 left. They decided to kick the onside kick. Beautiful onside kick. Got it. And it was...
Was it a bouncer?
It was... So, no, it wasn't the ones that they kick high, the guys can fair catch. He kicked it kind of low and hard to the kind of the up back here, behind the line. But he hit it so hard and at such a good angle, and then the bounce of it was just an awkward play for him, and it snuck through him. Colorado State got the ball, scored again. So at that point, it was a 6-point game, I think, with 2 minutes left.
And again, this is an offense that had scored 10 points up to this point, right?
Yeah.
It was 30 to 10, right?
It was a clutch. Yeah, it was just a crazy ending. And their quarterback got hurt before this even happened and came back into the game. It was broke something on his non-throwing hand. So he's in there holding his arm, protecting it. So then they kicked a second onside kick, which they actually got. And they called a bogus penalty, which I didn't know. I kind of knew you couldn't do this because otherwise I'd be like, why don't they do this onside kick? You're not allowed to throw a block until the ball goes 10 yards.
That's a stupid
rule. Which is so stupid. That's why it's so hard to recover onside kicks. Now, back in the day, they would just let you, just run in there and hit somebody as hard as you can. The ball could be trickling behind you. So, it was so bang-bang. The ball had gone almost 10 yards. Anyway, the guy, I guess by the letter of the law, is the right call. So, everybody at Colorado State's shit, whatever, game over. We have 2 timeouts left. Boise's getting it with 2 minutes, and we're down 6. Maybe a minute 50. So Boise does the typical run, and then what they did is they ran a zone read. Quarterback went around the corner 40 yards, got called back with a hold, which was actually a hold, but you know how it is in college football. Half times they don't throw it. So anyway, long story short, they punt it. I think I don't know if you're watching at this point. They get it to the 12-yard line. I think Colorado State got it back with 38 seconds and no timeouts.
33.
Got 1 first down, and it was kind of controversial. I told you it was 17 seconds left. A player was hurt, and I thought there was going to be a runoff.
Yeah.
But since they got the first down, I don't know if this is a new rule or not, they didn't run it off. Next play, complete it for 30 yards to get it to midfield. Last play of the game, which I always disagree with this. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Boise State's coach calls timeout to get his guys set up for Hail Mary like they haven't practiced it a million times. So Colorado State goes and draw. It was a drawn-up play. It's what you're trying to do in a Hail Mary, but threw it down perfectly. The guy, perfect bat right to the guy, catches it or doesn't catch it, but there was no angle that showed definitively it hit the ground.
That was the funny thing.
That was the but that had to be the... I'm sure there's something crazier out there, but in the last 10 years that I've seen, that's got to be the last crazy... they were down 20 with 3:50, and they came back to win the game on the last play.
That's the equivalent of the Northern Iowa A&M college basketball game where A&M was down by 12 with 37 seconds left.
Which is, I would say that's probably crazier because you don't have a chance at the onside kick, and you have to miss a lot of free throws and stuff, but 20 points and 350 was crazy.
The probability is pretty equal between the two.
And then watched, obviously... there was you actually told me about that one, West Virginia, Houston.
Yes, West Virginia, Houston was wild too. That one, essentially, Houston led most of the game. That was an interesting game because I think a lot of people thought West Virginia, the way they've been playing, was going to easily win that game. Houston controlled essentially the entire game, and then on the final drive, West Virginia had a 4th and 10 from midfield. And the same thing happened in the sense that they got a first down with 17 seconds to go. And the tight end, I believe, got it down to like the 30-yard line. And I believe they only needed they needed a touchdown. They were down by 4. And so they got it down to about the 30-yard line with 17 seconds. Well, the tight end immediately, he got hurt. And so he goes down. And I'm thinking like, okay, they got to at least burn their timeout or take a 10-second run.
You know what's crazy? You might want to look it up. I think they were down 3. I think they were trying to get it in field goal range, and he broke it. Because or was Houston down? You might be right. You were watching it, but I was looking at the deal.
You're
and
right.
Like,
wait. Let me think.
Because I was like, oh, they scored. They're just trying to get a field goal, and then I looked it up, and I think they scored. Unless I'm thinking.
I believe you're right. West Virginia lost by 2. So if you take off 6. They were up by 4, so they were down by 3.
Yeah.
So they were. You're right. I'm taking it back. I'm sorry. They were down by 3.
But yeah. I know the guy broke a tackle.
Right. So he goes down with 17 seconds, and essentially that's right, because I was thinking at this point like, okay, they got to burn their timeout now. They're about like the 30-yard line, so they're gonna try and get 10, 15 more yards and kick a field goal. It's going to overtime. Like, and so they got to save their timeout because it was a first down, no runoff. They didn't even, and that's the thing, they didn't have to use their timeout, but
they get in.
They get in, and they. It was actually a wild play how they got in. Dude broke like 3 tackles to get in the end zone. Dana Holgerson, 15 seconds to go, is throwing his headset off like the game's over. Literally takes the little thing off, throws it on the ground.
He's already thinking about getting drunk.
Yeah, that's right. He's already walking.
Dana.
He's
ready to get to the bar.
He's going to the bar. He's got a hooker on speed dial. So he.
I didn't say that, Dana. Yeah. That's this guy. I just know you drink. I'm sure you're a family man, Dana.
Dana's not a family man. We can see that. He looks like a
how dare you? He's a Leach disciple.
he definitely is a drinker. I can tell you that. But, Dana's already quitting on the team 15 seconds to go, which is always good. And somehow, Donavan Smith, who used to play for Texas Tech, they get the ball down. Oh, I forgot. The vaunted celebration penalty.
Yeah.
And that allowed Houston to return the kick from 15 yards closer, which allowed them to get it to about the 37. So, I think it was 15 seconds when they scored. So now you're at like 9 seconds. But one play allowed them to get to like the 50-yard line, and then there was like 4 seconds to go, and they backed so far off that they were able to do like another 5 yards real quick. So they got it to like the 40 or 45, and then same exact thing. There was no timeout, but Donavan Smith throws a Hail Mary, and it's tipped in the air, and it comes right back down to the receiver, and he catches it. And this one was a catch. It was clear catch. And Houston wins in walk-off fashion.
Wild,
for their Big 12
these have
games.
been the craziest. And then obviously Colorado. We don't have to go too far into it, but Colorado blowing a 29-point halftime lead, and that kid, I believe, had 290 yards receiving all in the second half.
Yes, Elic Ayomanor had 294 yards on 13 catches.
And I think 10 of those catches were slants.
Yes.
That's literally all they were running.
And they couldn't stop it.
They couldn't stop it.
Even Travis Hunter couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
The Colorado defense looked horrific. I mean, that was one of the biggest choke jobs I've seen in a long time. And the kid essentially, I didn't turn the game on. I had it on like you did. I turned it off. And my dad texted me like, "Are you watching Colorado?" And I thought he was going to be taunting me because they were up 45-0. And no, it was 29-19. When I turned the game on, which was, I believe, 29-19, I don't think I saw Stanford throw to any other receiver. I think they threw to him every single play.
No, it was every play.
It was every play. And the catch he had in overtime was the most ridiculous thing.
That was the best catch. I mean, that was...
It might have been the best catch all year. Keon Coleman had a great one this week, too.
You showed me that one. But around the guy.
Around the guy.
The end zone.
Unreal. But obviously Colorado loses in overtime. That was a wild one. Well, there was also one more... that I told you about, that Michigan State Rutgers game, and this wasn't as crazy as the others, but it was 24-6, and Michigan State had the ball, and the game looked over. But what was wild to me was how fast it happened. So they were down 24-6, Michigan State ball. The kid drops a punt on the 1-yard line. It rolls into the end zone, and Rutgers recovers. They score. There's a quick 3-and-out by Michigan State. Rutgers goes 13 plays or 14 plays. They hadn't scored an offensive touchdown the whole game. They go 14 plays, score in 3 minutes, and then on the ensuing kickoff, they kick a pooch kick, and the guy doesn't understand that it's a live ball if it bounces, lets it bounce. Rutgers picks it up and then runs a touchdown from 37 yards on the first play. It was I think 14-36. It was 24-6, and I think with 8:22 they were now down by 3. So it was a 21-point swing in like under 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
it was similar.
Pretty wild.
Similar in terms of like how it played out to the Colorado State game, but just not as late in the game, right?
Yeah.
But so just wild week in college football. And, looking at the rest of the games we can just quickly go through these, right? Like, I don't think Notre Dame USC was a surprise to either of us. We kind of talked about that last week. We thought Notre Dame was too physical for them. The only saving grace for USC was whether or not Notre Dame was too beaten down and injured from that brutal stretch of the season. But
rough day at the office for Caleb Williams.
Whoa, man, that was the worst game.
That definitely takes him out of being, I wouldn't say completely out of the Heisman race, but being the favorite. I think sure. I know Penix didn't have a great game.
Yeah.
But you know how the Heisman goes. It's the undefeated team quarterback that's having the good year, and that's typically what it is. So.
I actually think the guy who's going to win it is going to be Jordan Travis, because I think Washington's going to lose a game, and I think Florida State's going to keep winning.
Has his numbers been crazy?
They've not been amazing, but they've been just as good as some of the top contenders. And I think if he has some big games against some not as good teams down the stretch, he has a chance to win it. Just because I think they have a good chance to go undefeated, and I don't think Michigan.
What about the running back at Michigan? Is he even up there at all?
He I don't know. I looked at the box score last game.
Like he's got to score like 5 touchdowns a game.
You would think, but I looked at the box score last game and they blew out. Who was it? Was it Indiana. Yeah, he had like 57 yards. So like,
oh really?
It was weird. I don't know. I know he's coming off he tore his ACL, I think, in the playoffs last year, or he had some sort of major injury.
Just easing him back.
I'm assuming.
And
that's
I
what
haven't seen Michigan play much, but I just know they pound the ball behind that giant offensive line. So I figured his numbers are probably ridiculous.
They are. The guy who has the best numbers in college football, who I think deserves Heisman talk. If you're not just going to give it to the best player, and that's I always forget whether it's Jalen or Jaden, because there's so many of these, but Jaden Daniels, I think, the one at LSU, and his
numbers are crazy,
incredible. I mean, if they're undefeated, it's not even close. He's the favorite. He's like number 2 in yards and number 2 in touchdowns. Is just every week LSU's putting up. I think they're averaging, outside of that game against Florida State, they're averaging 50 points a game.
It's such a weird. I mean, you just don't associate Brian Kelly teams with scores that end up 55-51. It must be strange for him being on the sideline being like, this is an arena football game, basically, and no one's getting any stop. I mean, it's like every time you see those scores, LSU, it's in the 40s or 50s. There's not a lot of defense being played.
Nothing like any of his previous teams. It's just complete opposite. No offense and lots of defense. But last game real quick is Miami UNC, and that was a good matchup between the Hurricanes and the Tar Heels. Tar Heels were undefeated. Miami obviously coming off the kneel, and it was a close game early, and it looked like Miami was going to respond.
North Carolina was down at halftime. Right?
Yeah, Drake May had been sacked 5 times in the first half. Miami was looking good, and something flipped, and there was a lot of quit in the Miami team when it got. Because
they went down, and it seemed like there was a lot of quit. We kind of talked about it a little bit.
Got ugly quick.
When your coach screws up that bad the week before, I think it's really hard to keep the locker room and keep the players' respect. I mean, it's just tough getting it back. And when they fell behind, it seemed like they kind of quit. But I don't know what happened, because watching the first half. Maybe it was just turnovers and stuff, but the North Carolina turnover the ball, or was it Miami turning over the ball?
I know Miami.
It was just really weird that Miami was up, because they looked pretty even that first half. But, yeah, I mean, the wheels just fell off for Miami in a second. I mean, North Carolina went up as many as, 24 or 21? I know think Miami they were up, scored late.
No, you're right. I think they got up 17. I think they kicked it. They had the ball inside the 10, up 14, and Mac Brown kicked a field goal, and then Miami scored one late, because the final score was, I believe, a 10-point win for the Tar Heels. Yeah. But I think you're right. I think Miami.
No, it was so they went up 21. Miami scored, make it 14. North Carolina got it 17.
Yeah. Okay, that's what it was.
But yeah, that was a tale of two halves. I mean, it was very competitive, and then it wasn't competitive at all. So.
It wasn't, and. Do you think does North Carolina have a shot to actually make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, if they go undefeated and they beat Florida State, is that who they'd play in the ACC title?
Right, they don't play in the regular season. So
yeah, if North Carolina goes undefeated and beats Florida State, they're in the playoff. I don't know how you could keep them out unless just bizarre things happen but I just don't. Even Michigan, say Michigan plays Ohio State and Ohio State beats Michigan, like you have to put an undefeated North Carolina team.
Have to.
Even if that's, I mean, there's nothing else you can do about it. I mean, North Carolina beat Miami, and that's probably their only good win, right? Do they play Clemson or no?
I think they.
Not that Clemson's great, but
right, but it'd be a good win.
Yeah.
I think that they don't. I'd have to look at their schedule, but I believe.
What about Duke? They have to play
They play Duke this.
I
think they play Duke this week.
Okay, and I mean, I actually think. I mean, those teams are very close. If Duke had their starting quarterback, I think Duke might beat them. I think Duke's that good. So
yeah, I know Duke had a chance to go undefeated if they had won the game because they already beat Clemson. But here's their schedule. I'm wrong. They play Duke in a couple weeks, so they go. Their next 3 weeks are easy. Virginia at home, at Georgia Tech, who's a weird team who's better than they look at times. Yeah, scrappy. They play an FCS team and then they finish the year with Duke at home, at Clemson, at NC State. So that's the stretch right there, right? If you win those 3 games, you go. I think honestly, if you can get through, NC State's pretty bad this year. If you can just get through Duke and Clemson, at Clemson is going to be a tough one, and Duke is really, really good. So I don't know, but I will say this, and we can move on from college after this. But I think Drake May. You look at Drake May, Tez Walker. There's not a better. I don't think you're going to find a better quarterback wide receiver duo in the country. Like I don't think any game they're mismatched where they're not the better or even. The only duo I would say is even with them would be Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman. Yeah, other than that, and they're going to play each other, and that's going to be, man, I would love to see those 2 teams undefeated playing.
I'm with you though. I think Walker and May are probably a better, because May. I know you're high on the Florida State quarterback, and he is good, but he's not as good. No,
he's not nearly as. No, I think Walker, Drake May is the best quarterback in the country.
And Walker, and truly, I guess that's probably what happened in the second half. They really got him involved. I think he scored at least 2 touchdowns.
He did. Yeah, some big plays. It was more of his kind of comeback because he played the week before, but it was like easing back into it.
Yeah, I mean that offense seems pretty scary. The defense seems like maybe they can get enough stops to win games. But yeah, any undefeated ACC champs in no matter what, in my opinion. I don't think there's anything that's going to keep them out.
I mean, you could argue, I don't know about UNC, but if Florida State loses one and wins out and beats UNC in the title game, and UNC either has 1 loss or is undefeated, they have a good chance to still get in, I think, depending on, like, if Washington had 1 loss and Florida State had 1 loss, I think Florida State goes. Like, now you're not going to get in over an undefeated Washington team or over an undefeated Texas team or an undefeated Michigan. Or
the Big Ten's super weird, though, because from what you said, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are all on the same side. There is a weird scenario where all those teams somehow finish with 1 loss.
If they all lose to each other, like
which could easily happen. 100%. But I guess the team that at that point, the team that goes to the Big Ten championship obviously
is going to go.
Yeah,
and then at that point, it's like you have the question of like, okay, their schedule is a joke. All they've done is beat the other one, because if they all split, they'll have only beaten either one of the 2, Michigan, so they'll only have 1 real impressive win. That might be the team who gets left out as the Big Ten champ if they're all 1 loss. If it's undefeated, they're going.
I definitely think that there's no doubt that we'll have one big. I think the Big Ten is the only conference. Usually it's the SEC, but I think the Big Ten is the only conference that could potentially get 2 teams in, just in case weird things happen.
I agree. If weird things happen.
The Pac-12 champ gets in, but I guess Oregon and depending on how things play out, but I think you're going to get an ACC team, a Big 12 team, Big 10, and a Pac-12. I think we'll end up with 1 from each unless something strange happens.
Yeah, no doubt, though, going to be interesting to see how that plays out in college football and see who ends up getting in. I will say last thing, and I think that thank God we're getting a 12-team playoff, because it really sucks that...
It's going to be so awesome.
It's going to be... First of all, it's going to be a blast to watch and to be able to predict and have, a bracket and all that. But also, it just sucks that you have 5 really good conferences. And without a doubt, no matter what happens, one of the conferences is going to get left out. Sometimes even 2. So to me, I like the structure of how they're doing it with the automatic conference champions and then the highest ranked teams. So I'm excited to see it.